Have you ever felt like you're living with a slight delay?
A delay? Like, how do you mean?
I'm talking about a really specific, almost physical sensation. Like the present moment, the exact second you and I are existing in right now, is this really tight, uncomfortable suit that you're being forced to wear.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay.
Right? It restricts your movement, it demands all your attention, it chafes. But your past,
Yeah.
the past feels like this comfortable old sweater.
Yeah, you just put it on and suddenly you can actually breathe.
Exactly. Your shoulders drop, you feel like yourself again.
It's a strangely universal sensation, isn't it? I mean, when you're in the thick of the now, especially during, moments of stress or high demand, everything just requires immense processing power.
Oh, for sure.
You are hyper aware of every single choice, every sensory input. So slipping back into a memory, into that worn-in cotton of the past, it feels like relief because the outcome is already decided.
Right. The tension of possibility is just gone.
Exactly.
See, I always thought it was just a mood, like a bout of nostalgia or maybe just a coping mechanism for stress.
Yeah, just human psychology.
Right. But what if that feeling, that sensation of the present being suffocating and the past being where we actually live, what if that wasn't just psychological?
Okay, now you're getting into the deep end.
That is exactly our mission today. We are plunging into a wildly unique, completely genre-bending universe created by an author named Anatolia Borisov.
Who also writes under the moniker BorisovNoir.
Yes, exactly. We've got this massive stack of excerpts from his core philosophical doctrine. It's a text titled Quantum Orthodoxy, a manifesto of memory. And he defines this as a brand new subgenre, something he calls metaphysical noir.
And noir is definitely the right word for it, but not in the traditional detective in a trench coat sense.
No, definitely not.
It's dark, it's shadowy, it's incredibly dense. This manifesto is an unapologetic synthesis. We are going to be unpacking a worldview that attempts to seamlessly stitch together hard quantum mechanics, orthodox Christian theology, deep neurobiology, and this is key, his own raw, sometimes brutal personal memoir.
It's a lot.
Oh.
And the ultimate goal of all of this, the staggering premise we have to explore today, is his argument that cutting-edge physics and ancient religious faith might actually be describing the exact same reality.
Just using completely different vocabularies.
Exactly. If we accept even a fraction of what he's proposing, it completely rewires how we understand free will, the flow of time, and the purpose of human memory.
But before we really get into the weeds here, we do need to offer a roadmap and a quick disclaimer for everyone listening.
Yeah, that's super important.
Because the sources we are diving into are heavy. They touch on deeply religious dogmas, specifically Eastern Orthodox Christianity. And they are set against intense historical and political backdrops. We are talking about the Soviet reality of the author's youth, all the way up to the 2026 blackouts in Ukraine, which is where and when he was actually writing this text in the dark.
Literally in the dark. And to be perfectly clear to everyone listening, we are not here to endorse these specific religious views.
No, not at all.
We aren't taking theological stances, and we absolutely aren't taking any political sides regarding the backdrop of the text. Our job is strictly to map out the fascinating intellectual architecture of this author's mind.
We're basically impartial guides walking you through this metaphysical landscape so you can see how these wild ideas connect.
Exactly. So before we jump into the hard physics of black holes or the mechanics of resurrection, we need to understand the lens through which this author views the world.
We have to start with his philosophy on honesty, because if you don't understand his strategy of honesty, the rest of this deep dive will just seem like chaotic sci-fi.
Yeah, let's open that up. He starts the text by classifying writers and really all creators into three distinct types.
Okay.
Category 1, he calls the sellers of air. These are the creators of empty, totally forgettable works, books or movies meant just to rest the brain.
Like beach reads.
Right. You consume them on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday, you can't remember a single character's name.
And it's important to note that Borisov isn't actually condemning them. He says they have a right to exist, almost as a biological necessity.
Like letting off steam.
Yeah, they let you air out your brain from the crushing weight of daily routine. They provide a service.
Then you have category 2, the sellers of the mind. These are the creators of fantastic, incredibly intricate, illusory worlds.
Like massive fantasy epics.
Yeah, they trade in synthetic emotions. They build these massive sandcastles of lore to help you escape reality completely.
Again, he sees the value there. They pull you away from your urgent, localized problems and carry you off into invented lives. It's a high-level distraction.
But then we hit the third category.
The heavy one.
Right, this is the uncomfortable one, and it was where Borisov firmly places himself the sellers of themselves.
He calls this the most grueling category of creation. These are writers who use their actual lived trauma, their public rises, their humiliating falls, their literal dirty laundry as their creative fuel.
They refuse to invent artificial characters to hide behind. Instead, they just grind up their own lives to build universes that are fundamentally truthful.
Borisov actually describes his own work as, and this is a quote, a reportage in negligee from a brothel.
It's a shocking phrase, but it perfectly encapsulates the psychological weight of his strategy of authorial honesty.
He isn't writing fiction to escape the world. He is actively dressing his personal life in genre tropes to deliver hard-won convictions.
I mean, this is a guy who experienced a massive rise in Soviet journalism, a devastating fall into darkness, and what he calls astral battles.
Which we'll get into.
Yeah, followed by a 40-year period of silence and eventually his salvation through Orthodox faith. He is wrapping all of that in the aesthetic of metaphysical noir.
It's a transaction where the currency is raw authenticity. He draws a really sharp contrast between what he calls plastic literary worlds, the smooth, clean, sterilized worlds of the sellers of the mind, and his own work.
Which he calls world's abscesses.
Yikes.
Right. They are bleeding, they are painful to touch, and they are ripped straight from the gut. I'm actually trying to think of a way to visualize this. It's kind of like comparing those three types of writers to different experiences with food.
Oh, I'm intrigued. How does that map out?
Well, the sellers of air are your fast food calories.
Mm-hmm.
It's quick, it tastes fine in the moment, it hits a basic craving.
But it offers zero nutrition.
Exactly, and you forget you ate it an hour later. The sellers of the mind are like ultra-high-end molecular gastronomy. It's fascinating. There's dry ice, foam. It's a massive spectacle of technique.
But it's entirely synthetic and constructed. It's artifice.
Right. But the sellers of themselves, that's like a guy dragging you into the woods and forcing you to forage for bitter, wild roots in the dirt.
Oh, what?
It isn't pretty. It might actually cure whatever disease you have or might make you violently sick to your stomach. But it is undeniably aggressively real.
That is a phenomenal way to frame it. He's saying, I am handing you the bitter root.
Right.
But here is where we need to apply some critical friction. If an author is blending their painful, gritty, literal reality with massive, abstract concepts like astral warfare or existing in multiple dimensions, how do we, as readers, separate the literal truth from the metaphorical packaging?
That is the exact wall I hit when reading this. If he's a seller of himself, prioritizing absolute honesty, but he's talking about astral battles, is he having a break from reality, or is he using a metaphor for severe mental health struggles?
And the answer within the text is that the boundary is intentionally fundamentally blurred. For Borisov, the internal psychological battle is the astral battle.
Interesting.
To understand how he blends his literal reality with this sci-fi metaphor, we have to look at a bizarre framing device he includes early in the manifesto.
Oh, the medical report.
Yes. He presents a fictional medical report to explain his actual daily perception of reality.
Right, the epicrisis from the year 2045. This part threw me for a loop initially. We were suddenly dropped into this place called Zone Zeta 12.
Which functions as an archive of quantum consciousness.
And there is an entire scientific, medical, philosophical commission studying a newly discovered phenomenon that they've named Borisov syndrome.
The makeup of this fictional commission is a massive clue to the reader about the scope of the book. Their titles represent the sheer interdisciplinary ambition we're dealing with.
Yeah, run through those titles because they're wild.
Okay, so you have the chief chronoscope, whose only job is to watch the mechanics of time. The philosophan, an ontologist probing the fundamental nature of being. The alzaznolog, who researches active consciousness.
Like a neuroscientist.
Basically. Then the podsonettle, who maps deep subconscious psychic processes. The quantograph, analyzing the quantum mechanics of the brain. And finally, the mysterious and the dukovide, who represent the mystical and orthodox theological perspectives.
It's like the ultimate impossible academic dream team. Yeah. You've got quantum physicists sitting next to theologians and subconscious mappers.
And what are they all looking at? They are studying this Borisov syndrome. But the medical report makes one thing very clear up front. They do not classify this as a disease or a pathology.
They call it a quantum paradox of consciousness.
Exactly. The patient, who is Borisov himself, lives with a literal, measurable delay in time.
Which brings us right back to your opening thought experiment. For this patient, the present feels suffocating. It is the tight, constricting new shirt.
Yeah, every movement in the now requires immense, exhausting effort because it demands an instant, on-the-fly response to stimuli.
Meanwhile, the past is his anchor. It's the worn, soft T-shirt. It provides peace.
And the quantograph on this fictional commission explains this using physics. He says Borisov's consciousness is a wave that has been shifted out of phase.
Shifted out of phase.
Right. He is experiencing an interference pattern where the past and the present are literally overlapping in his mind.
If we strip away the sci-fi framing of Zone Theta 12, the underlying truth here is incredibly profound. This syndrome is a brilliant, highly technical metaphor for how human beings process trauma, or even just rapid, overwhelming societal change.
Absolutely. When the now demands too much processing power, when the world is too chaotic, too dangerous, or changing too fast, our minds retreat into the past.
We live in the lag because the present is too suffocating to compute in real time.
It makes me think of watching a live stream of a sports event, but you have a terrible, spotty internet connection.
Well, that's a great analogy.
The event is happening live in objective reality. The goal has been scored, but you are experiencing it with a 5-second buffer.
Your personal now is actually the objective recent past. You're constantly playing catch-up, living in a buffered state.
And what's fascinating is the treatment plan recommended by the Aussosnolog in the text. The recommendation isn't to force the patient into linear time.
You don't try to cure the buffer by dragging them violently into the present moment.
Exactly. Instead, you accept the phenomenon. You teach the patient to stop fighting the current and to learn how to dance to their unique quantum rhythm. It's a message of profound acceptance regarding neurodivergence and trauma processing.
But wait, let me pause you there. Because when I was reading this, a thought hit me.
Okay, lay it on me.
If we look at basic, established neurobiology, our brains always take time to process sensory input.
Right.
Light hits the retina, the signal travels down the optic nerve, the visual cortex parses it, the brain cross-references it with memory. All of that takes milliseconds, sometimes longer for complex stimuli.
It does.
So are we all technically living in the past? Is Borisov's syndrome really a sci-fi anomaly? Or is he just agonizingly hyper-aware of a fundamental biological fact?
You've hit the exact pivot point of his philosophy. He isn't making up a sci-fi disease. He is taking a biological reality and scaling it up to an existential worldview.
Oh, I see.
He references neurophysiologists directly in the text who confirm that unavoidable delay between an event happening and our conscious awareness of it. We never, ever see the world as it is right now.
We only see the world as it was a fraction of a second ago.
Exactly. We are all living in a time capsule of the immediate past.
Okay, so if our biology forces us to live on a delay, what is actually happening in the physics of the universe? Does the now even exist, or are we just biologically incapable of reaching it?
To answer that, Borisov takes us on a deep dive into the physics of time, starting with Einstein and moving into some radically controversial contemporary theories.
Let's start with Einstein, specifically his special theory of relativity.
Right. The text mentions the twin paradox here.
I know the basic setup of the twin paradox, but how does it actually prove that time isn't a fixed thing?
Well, in classical physics, like Newtonian physics, time was thought of as a universal clock ticking away at the exact same rate for everything in the universe.
A second for you is a second for me, no matter what.
Exactly. But Einstein showed that space and time are woven together into space-time, and the speed at which you move through space affects the speed at which you move through time.
So if you send one twin into space in a rocket traveling close to the speed of light and keep the other twin on Earth,
the traveling twin's clock literally ticks slower relative to the Earth twin.
that is just so counterintuitive.
It is. When the rocket returns, the twin who stayed on Earth might be an old man, while the traveling twin has only aged a few years. Time bends. It stretches and compresses. It is not absolute.
Which totally shatters the idea of a universal now. My now and your now can be completely different depending on how fast we are moving.
Right.
But the text points out that Einstein's most astonishing discovery wasn't just mathematical. It was deeply philosophical. He wrote a famous letter to the widow of his lifelong friend, Michel Bessot.
Yes. Bessot had just passed away, and Einstein wrote to comfort his family. He wrote, "For us convinced physicists, the distinction between past, present, and future is nothing more than an illusion, however persistent."
That quote is just staggering. It's beautiful, but it's terrifying. What did he actually mean by that? How can the past and future be an illusion?
Einstein viewed the universe as a four-dimensional block. Imagine a massive, solid crystal.
Okay, a crystal.
3 dimensions are space, up, down, left, right, forward, backward. The 4th dimension is time. In this block universe, every single moment that has ever happened and every moment that ever will happen exists simultaneously within the crystal.
So the Big Bang, your birth, right now as you listen to this, and the eventual heat death of the universe,
Yeah.
they are all just different coordinates inside this solid block.
Exactly. There's no flow of time. The feeling of time passing is just our consciousness moving along the time axis. Everything just is.
Okay, so relativity gives us the frozen crystal block, but then the text moves into quantum mechanics where things get significantly weirder.
Oh, much weirder.
It brings up something called the page-Wooders mechanism. I need you to explain this one to me like I'm 5, because the text says it suggests time emerges from quantum entanglement, and I get lost right there.
It is notoriously difficult to grasp, but let's break it down. In the 1980s, physicists Don Page and William Wooders proposed a theoretical model for a universe that is completely static.
Static, so nothing changes.
Right. The universe itself doesn't change. It doesn't experience time. But within this static universe, you have particles that are entangled.
Okay, entanglement.
Entanglement means 2 particles share a quantum state. Whatever happens to one instantly correlates with the other, even if they are light years apart. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance.
Okay, so the particles are intimately linked, but how does that create time?
Page and Wooders argued that if you take one part of the static universe and treat it as a clock, and you entangle it with the rest of the universe, an internal observer, someone inside the universe looking at the clock, will perceive change.
Wait, really?
Yes, the entanglement creates the illusion of dynamics. Time isn't a fundamental property of reality. It is an emergent property of entanglement.
So if you could step outside the universe and look at the whole system, it would be totally frozen.
But from the inside, because you are entangled with the system, you experience the flow of time.
That is wild. It's like being inside a snow globe. From the outside, the snow globe is just a static piece of glass sitting on a shelf. But if you are a tiny figure inside, the water is swirling, the snow is falling, things are changing.
Exactly. And this leads right into another concept the text highlights, John Wheeler's famous question. Wheeler was an American theoretical physicist, and he used to challenge his students by asking, is the moon there when nobody looks?
Which sounds like Philosophy 101. A tree falls in a forest and no one is around.
Right, but Wheeler meant it as a hardcore physics question regarding the collapse of the wave function.
Oh, okay.
In quantum mechanics, before a particle is observed, it doesn't have a definite state. It exists in a superposition of all possible states at once. It could be spinning up, spinning down, here, there, everywhere.
A blur of probabilities.
But the moment an observer looks at it, measures it, or interacts with it, that wave of possibilities collapses into one single definite reality.
So the observer is literally forcing reality to make a decision.
Yes. Observation creates reality, which implies that time and space aren't just an empty stage where events passively happen. Consciousness and observation are active participants in building the stage itself.
But where this deeply resonated with Borisov's idea of memory was the introduction of the British physicist Julian Barbour. The text leans heavily on his book, The End of Time.
Barbour is an incredibly interesting figure. He essentially left the traditional academic physics system. He moved to a farm in the English countryside, made a living translating Russian scientific articles, and used his total independence to think without the constraints of university, published, or parish culture.
And his big claim is that time simply does not exist, period.
He proposes a concept he calls Platonia.
From what I understand, Platonia is like an infinite archive. It's the universe imagined as an endless library of static, frozen snapshots, or what he calls nows.
Yes, every single possible configuration of particles in the universe exists as one static frame.
There is no timeline connecting them. They just all exist, scattered out.
Exactly.
But the immediate pushback I have, and I imagine anyone listening has, is if reality is just an infinite collection of frozen frames, why do we experience change?
That's the big question.
Right. Like I can watch a leaf turn yellow and fall off a tree. I can watch a bird fly across the sky. How does Barbour explain movement if everything is static?
Barbour answers this with a concept he calls time capsules. He uses the brilliant analogy of a photograph of a billiard table.
Okay, picture a pool table.
Imagine you look at a high-resolution photo of a pool table. The balls are scattered everywhere. One ball is perfectly positioned right against the cushion, as if it just bounced off. Now, look closely at that photograph. Is anything moving in it?
No, it's a piece of paper. It's completely static.
Exactly. But your brain looks at the arrangement of the balls, the angles, the proximity to the cushions, and it instantly constructs a narrative of movement.
Oh, I see.
The photograph contains the records of movement, the trajectories, the physics of the bounce. It is a time capsule. It is a highly structured, static arrangement that encodes the memory of a past event.
So Barber argues that our brains, our entire neurological and biological structures are exactly that. Time capsules.
Yes. We are incredibly complex, static configurations of atoms that contain encoded memories of other nows.
So if I'm understanding this, Platonia is like a massive table covered in trillions of individual photographs.
Right.
I am not a character in a movie playing out on a screen. I am just one single photograph on that table. But inside my specific photograph, there are millions of tiny Polaroid pictures, my memories, that trick my brain into believing there was a before.
That is a perfect translation of the physics. The illusion of the flow of time comes from our brain reading the records contained within our current static state.
And if we synthesize this, you can see why Borisov leans on Barber to validate his philosophical intuition. If time doesn't flow, and reality is just an infinite collection of static frames, then the past isn't gone.
It isn't dead. It hasn't vanished into the ether.
It exists simultaneously with the present, that worn old sweater you want to slip into. It is still there, perfectly preserved, sitting in Platonia.
It's a comforting thought, but the text is fair enough to acknowledge that this isn't universally accepted physics.
Oh, absolutely not. It's highly debated.
The text brings in the counter-arguments from other major physicists to show the tension. Lee Smolin, for example, argues vehemently against the block universe in Platonia.
What's his angle?
Smolin says time must be real, it must be fundamental, because without the flow of time, there can be no true change. And without true change, there is no novelty, no evolution, and ultimately, no freedom.
And then there's Sean Carroll.
Right, another prominent physicist. Yeah. He approaches it more pragmatically. He jokes that calling time an illusion is like saying the wooden desk his computer sits on is an illusion because it's mostly empty space at the quantum level.
Yeah.
It might be technically true in quantum math, but it's a useless definition for a human being trying to live their life. You still can't put your hand through the desk.
And that tension is exactly where my brain gets stuck. Let's say Einstein and Barber are entirely right. Everything is just static snapshots in a 4D crystal. Every moment is frozen in Platonia.
Okay.
Where on earth does human choice come into play? If my future, me deciding what to eat for dinner tomorrow or who I'm going to marry, is already a snapshot sitting in the infinite library, aren't I just a puppet?
You feel like the choice was already made.
Yeah. Am I just experiencing the illusion of making a choice that was actually frozen in the crystal a billion years ago? Where is the free will?
You have just articulated the central crisis of the entire manifesto, that precise tension between a timeless, static, deterministic universe and the undeniable human experience of free will is the beating heart of what Borisov calls quantum orthodoxy.
Okay.
To resolve this, we have to move into the core of his philosophical framework, the concept of the two books of being.
All right, let's open the books. Explain to me what the virtual book is.
The virtual book is infinite. It contains every single possible decision you could ever make, every word you could ever speak, every potential turn of fate that could ever exist.
In the language of quantum mechanics, the virtual book is the ultimate wave function.
Exactly. It is the superposition of all possibilities before an observer looks at it. It contains the reality where you turned left, the reality where you turned right, the reality where you never left the house at all.
Okay, so it's the menu of everything. And book 2 is the book of reality.
Yes. The book of reality is the finalized manuscript. Borisov says it is written in letters of fire.
Letters of fire, wow.
It contains only what actually happened. Once a possibility collapses into reality, it is burned into this book. It is the absolute record of memory.
And the human being, the consciousness, stands right on the razor-thin boundary between these two books, a location Borisov refers to as point zero.
Point zero is crucial to understand. This is the elusive present moment we've been talking about. It's the tight shirt.
Oh, bring it back to the shirt.
Yep. This is the exact coordinate where the physics concept of the collapse of the wave function slams directly into the theological concept of the manifestation of free will.
So at point zero, I'm looking at the infinite menu of the virtual book. I make my choice, the wave function collapses, and my specific choice burns into the book of reality forever.
But Borisov doesn't just use physics here. He brings in heavy Orthodox theology to explain how we choose. He references Professor A.I. Osipov.
Tell me about Osipov.
Professor Osipov is a major figure at the Moscow Theological Academy, and his theological dogma is fascinating when viewed through this quantum lens. Osipov states that at every single moment, every human being is placed in the absolute best possible position to make the right choice, what he calls the true choice leading towards salvation.
The idea is that God doesn't play dice with your soul.
Exactly. The exact circumstances you are in, no matter how agonizing, chaotic, or painful, are mathematically and spiritually the optimal conditions for your specific soul to choose a light.
I have to push back on that.
Go for it.
That sounds almost like toxic positivity on a cosmic scale. If someone is suffering horribly, if they were in the middle of a war zone or battling severe illness, saying this is the optimal condition for your soul feels incredibly harsh.
It is a harsh dogma if you view it purely as a physical comfort. But theologically, it isn't saying the situation is good. It is saying the situation is calibrated.
Calibrated.
Right. It implies that human consciousness is being tested in the exact crucible required to force a genuine choice between despair and faith. And to bridge this heavy theology back to physics, the text introduces something called the 37 dimensions experiment.
Right. The text mentions that scientists managed to make a photon exist in 37 dimensions simultaneously. When I read dimensions, my mind immediately goes to sci-fi parallel universes. Is that what it means here?
Not exactly parallel universes. In quantum physics, a dimension in this context usually refers to a measurable quantum state or property of a particle.
Like its spin or something.
Yeah. For example, a photon has properties like polarization, spatial mode, orbital angular momentum, and time energy. If scientists can manipulate a single photon to exist in a superposition of 37 distinct states at the exact same time, it proves that even the simplest system has a staggeringly huge potential of multivariate states.
So Borisov looks at that photon and says, if a tiny particle of light has 37 simultaneous paths it can take, imagine the near-infinite multivariant paths available to a complex human consciousness at point zero.
Exactly. We are not confined to a single, rigid, predetermined line of fate. We are walking probability engines.
And to illustrate how this resolves the free will debate, Borisov creates an incredible thought experiment, the drop in the glass. This is the masterpiece of the Manifesto.
It really is.
I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of this because it's so visual.
I can break down the setup. Imagine a perfectly clean, large pane of glass. That glass represents human life.
Okay, got it.
You take an eyedropper and place a single drop of colored liquid at the very top edge. That entry point is birth. Gravity is naturally going to pull that drop down the glass until it reaches the bottom edge, which is the exit point, or death. Now, if you hold that pane of glass perfectly plumb, perfectly straight up and down, the drop will fall in one single straight vertical line.
That would be strict determinism. One fate, no choices.
Right. But life isn't perfectly plumb. Life is chaotic. So, in the experiment, you tilt the glass to the left, the drop veers left. You tilt it backward, it slows down. You rotate it right, it zigzags.
So the drop is constantly changing course.
If you could somehow run this experiment millions and millions of times on the exact same piece of glass, tracing every single possible path that drop could ever take under every possible angle of tilt, the entire glass would eventually be covered in a dense, intricate network of colored lines.
Okay, I see it. That entire network of drawn lines represents the virtual book.
Yeah.
Every possible path is mapped out.
Yeah.
And the tilt of the glass represents the external conditions of your life, the things you absolutely cannot control. Where you were born, genetic predispositions, a sudden economic collapse, a war breaking out. The tilt forces the drop in certain directions.
But here is the critical philosophical leap. In Borisov's model, the observer standing over the experiment is human consciousness. When you pour a fresh drop at the top of the glass, the path it takes isn't blindly determined by fate.
The observer's consciousness is what actualizes one specific path.
Yes, but with a crucial caveat. You cannot invent a new path. You cannot draw a line that isn't already mapped out in the virtual book. The physics of the glass and the tilt dictate the available routes.
But out of the infinite possibilities already drawn on the glass, your consciousness chooses which pre-existing virtual path becomes the book of reality.
Exactly.
Oh, that is brilliant. It makes me think of playing a massive, incredibly complex, open-world video game.
Like an RPG.
Yeah. The game developers have already coded every possible ending, every single map route, every tree you can walk past, every dialogue option. That code on the disk is the virtual book. It is static and complete. The game itself doesn't change.
Right. The code is set.
But your specific playthrough, the exact buttons you press when a monster jumps out, the path you choose to walk, creates a totally unique save file. That save file is your book of reality.
That is a flawless modern analogy. The code exists timelessly. God, or the universe, doesn't force your hands on the controller. They simply provide the ultimate staggering menu of coded choices.
And the tilt of the glass might make certain levels incredibly difficult.
But Osipov's theology guarantees there's always at least one coded path leading out of the darkness at any given second. Fate isn't an iron railway track. It's a terrifyingly complex crossroads.
Okay, so we stand at point zero. We look at the virtual book, we make our choice, and we write our save file into the book of reality.
Right.
But that immediately begs a massive existential question. Once you've made that choice, once the ink is dry and the save file is written, what actually happens to that data?
What do you mean?
Like when we die, when the brain turns to dust, does the book of reality just rot and disappear?
To answer that, Borisov takes us away from human neurobiology and forces us to look up at the sky. Specifically, we have to talk about astrophysics, black holes, the concept of unitarity, and what he dramatically calls the Great Rendering.
This is the section where he drops his boldest manifesto claim. He writes, "Science not only does not contradict but confirms God the Creator." That is a massive leap to make.
It is a massive leap, but he builds the bridge very methodically using quantum information theory. To understand it, we have to look at the most destructive objects in the universe. Black holes.
Okay, let's talk black holes.
In classical Einsteinian physics, a black hole is the ultimate cosmic trash compactor. If an object, say a spaceship or a planet or an encyclopedia, falls past the event horizon, it is gone forever. Classical physics says a black hole can be completely described by only three numbers: its mass, its electric charge, and its spin.
The text calls this the no-hair theorem, right?
Yes. The no-hair theorem basically states that the black hole has no distinguishing features or hair to tell you what fell inside it.
So it strips away all identity.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if you throw in a star made of hydrogen or a billion encyclopedias, the black hole just gets slightly heavier. All the specific complex information about the objects, their chemical makeup, their history, their atomic structure is considered utterly destroyed.
But quantum mechanics has a serious problem with that.
A catastrophic problem. Quantum mechanics is built on an ironclad law called unitarity. Unitarity dictates that quantum information, the complete mathematical description of the state of any system, can never, ever be lost. Never. It can be scrambled beyond recognition, it can be hidden, but it cannot be deleted from the universe. If you know the exact quantum state of the universe right now, the math says you should be able to run the equations backward and perfectly reconstruct the past.
Which creates a massive paradox. Classical physics says the black hole deletes the information. Quantum mechanics says it's impossible to delete information.
Precisely. This is the famous black hole information paradox. For decades, it tore the physics community apart. Then Stephen Hawking came along.
Hawking radiation.
Yes, he discovered what we now call Hawking radiation. He proved mathematically that black holes aren't entirely black. They actually leak a tiny amount of thermal radiation over billions of years, meaning eventually they will evaporate and disappear completely.
But initially, Hawking thought this radiation was completely random, which meant when the black hole evaporated, the information was still lost forever.
But the physics community fought back against Hawking on this, and he eventually conceded, right?
He did, because other physicists like Leonard Susskind and Gerard Hooft proposed radical solutions to save unitarity.
They developed the holographic principle.
Right.
Yeah.
They suggested that when an object falls into a black hole, its 3D information isn't destroyed. It is actually perfectly encoded on the 2D surface of the black hole's event horizon.
And as the black hole slowly evaporates, that stored information is subtly entangled in the outgoing Hawking radiation.
The text uses a really grounding analogy here. It compares falling into a black hole to burning a notebook. If I write down all my deepest secrets in a notebook and throw it into a bonfire, to my human eyes, that information is destroyed.
The paper is ash. The words are gone.
But from the standpoint of absolute God-level quantum physics, if you possess a supercomputer powerful enough to track every single molecule of smoke, every single photon of heat radiating from the fire, and the exact position of every flake of ash, you could theoretically run the physics in reverse and perfectly reconstruct the entire notebook.
The text wasn't erased from the universe, it was just severely scrambled.
That is the exact mechanism Borisov is utilizing. He takes this victory of unitarity, the scientific guarantee that information is immortal, and he makes an audacious intellectual bridge to theology.
He introduces the Great Rendering.
He argues that if the iron laws of astrophysics guarantee that the core code of a system is never lost, then the Christian dogmatic concept of bodily resurrection is not a fairy tale or magic.
He literally calls it a technical inevitability.
Yes, because if the universe naturally preserves all information, even against the crushing infinite gravity of a black hole, then God, the ultimate observer, the ultimate supercomputer, simply possesses the technology required to reconstruct our scrambled data.
It's the ultimate theological comfort presented through the lens of data recovery. Scientifically speaking, nothing you have ever experienced, no pain you have felt, no joy you have witnessed, and no person you have loved is truly deleted.
It's like viewing the universe as an indestructible blockchain, or the ultimate cloud backup system. Even if the hardware, our fragile physical bodies, falls into the compactor of death and disease, the source code, the true book of reality, is safely saved in the cloud.
It can be downloaded and rendered again when the time comes.
And Borisov doesn't just leave this as a cosmic abstraction. To ground this massive idea back into our human biology, he brings in the research of neurophysiologist T.V. Chernigovskaya.
Her research confirms that the human brain operates much like this immortal universe. It remembers everything. The brain is an absolute staggering repository of data.
Everything is stored.
Chernigovskaya states that nothing falls out of the sieve. Every face in a crowd, every smell, every word you skimmed in a magazine 10 years ago, it is all encoded in your neural network, even if you can't consciously access it.
Well, wait, bringing up Chernigovskaya actually introduces a major snag in Borisov's argument.
Oh, how so?
The text notes her research showing that the brain actually makes decisions up to 30 seconds before we are consciously aware of them.
Right.
If I'm trying to decide between ordering a salad or a burger, my brain initiates the neural pathway for the burger 30 seconds before my conscious mind says, I'll have the burger.
So your biology beats your consciousness to the punch.
Right. If the choice is made by my biology before I even realize it, isn't that a direct contradiction to the whole concept of point zero and free will?
Mm-hmm.
If my subconscious decides, who is actually choosing the path on the glass?
It's a fantastic, vital pushback. But the way to resolve this apparent paradox within Borisov's framework is to understand what the subconscious brain is actually consulting during those 30 seconds.
What do you mean?
The brain's 30-second lead isn't some external fate or robotic programming overriding your free will. It is consulting the memory of your past choices.
Oh, I see.
It is rapidly scanning your personal book of reality. Your past selves, the thousands of choices you've made over your lifetime, are essentially collaborating in the background to tee up the decision for your present self based on who you have trained yourself to be.
So my past choices train my subconscious algorithm. I'm slowly building the machine that makes the 30-second decisions.
Precisely. Which underscores why the concept of memory is the title of the Manifesto. Memory is the core of this entire philosophy.
If our code is never lost by the universe, and our brain retains an absolute record of our reality, it profoundly affects how we live our daily, messy human lives, especially how we deal with the passage of time, the accumulation of objects, and the grief of losing those we love.
And this brings us to the emotional core of the deep dive. The text finally pivots away from these massive galactic concepts of black holes and quantum fields and drills down to a deeply personal, intimate level. Borisov introduces his concept of the grayscale.
Tell me about the grayscale.
It's his personal algorithm for viewing a human lifespan. It's an incredibly stark, realistic way of looking at things. Birth is the starting point, a blinding flash of white light. Absolute potential.
And death.
Death is the endpoint, the absolute absence of light, black. And life itself is the long, fading gradient of gray graphite in between.
He gets really vulnerable here to illustrate this. He reflects on his own life, and he lists out the things he has possessed. He mentions having had 6 wives, 20 different properties, and 25 cars throughout his life.
That's quite a list.
At first glance, you might think he's boasting about an extravagant lifestyle. But his conclusion is incredibly humbling and melancholic. He says that the sheer volume of choices and possessions didn't bring clarity in the moment.
Right.
You only know what is truly yours, what is truly home, who is truly your beloved, through the contrast of having those choices and viewing them through the long prism of time and memory.
It is the emotional manifestation of the drop and the glass. He lived a life where the glass was tilted violently in many directions. He explored dozens of paths, acquired things, lost things.
But looking back from near the bottom of the glass, only a few of those lines glowed with any real meaning. The rest was just noise.
Which leads to what I think is the most poignant part of the text, a section he calls Dialogues with the Departed. Borisov openly admits that he spends time talking to his lost loved ones. But he aggressively insists that this isn't madness, and it isn't some mystical seance or spiritualism.
No, he treats it almost computationally, which makes it all the more heartbreaking. He says that a human being is a complex code.
A code, yeah.
When you love someone, you don't just memorize their static face. You memorize their algorithm. You know their specific way of walking, the exact length of a pause they take before they get angry, the specific intonation of their laugh, the exact way they would sigh.
Because Borisov's memory is so absolute, and because he believes the universe never deletes this information, he is literally pressing play on their code in his own mind.
He's running a high-fidelity simulation of exactly how they would react today. And this ties right back into Chernigovskaya's neurobiology, specifically regarding how smell functions as a direct physical anchor to memory. Borisov calls this phenomenon the fragrance of the lotus.
Right. Neurobiologically, the olfactory bulb has direct connections to the amygdala and the hippocampus, the brain's emotion and memory centers.
Smell bypasses the logical filtering systems.
Borisov describes how a specific scent, like a sweet, slightly astringent lotus, can act as an electric shock to the system. It violently yanks the past directly into the present.
It entirely bypasses that time lag or buffering state we talked about at the beginning.
Exactly. In a fraction of a second, the simulation of the past is running at full capacity in your mind, indistinguishable from the present.
Let's bring this directly down to earth for everyone listening. Think about someone you've lost. Have you ever been in a situation, maybe you're watching a movie, where you see something ridiculous happen at the grocery store and you knew exactly what that person would say?
You could hear their exact tone of voice, their specific sarcastic remark, ringing in your head with perfect clarity.
Yes. Borisov is saying you aren't going crazy. You aren't just reminiscing. You are literally running their source code in the hardware of your own brain. They are alive inside your time capsule.
It validates the psychological profundity of grief and memory. In Borisov's worldview, memory is not a heavy chain holding you back in the past, preventing you from living in the now. It is a compass.
The pain you feel over a loss, that intense, sweet bitterness he describes, is mathematical proof that you had something real. It's an anchor in the book of reality.
Restoring the code of a loved one internally, keeping their algorithm running, is the absolute highest achievement of our neurological time capsules.
So when I try to put all of this together, is he essentially arguing that the inner world, our minds, our memories, our simulations, is actually larger, more significant, and more real than the physical outer world?
Without a doubt, that is the core tenet of metaphysical noir. The outer physical world is just the virtual book. It is an infinite field of uncollapsed probabilities and chaotic physics. It's cold and indifferent.
But the inner world?
The inner world is the only place where the book of reality is truly read, felt, and suffered. The inner world is the only place where meaning is actually manufactured.
Wow. Okay, we have traveled an immense distance today. We started with the physical sensation of a tight shirt and an old sweater, and we journeyed through the physics of relativity, the twin paradox, and quantum entanglement.
It's been quite a ride.
We wrestled with the theology of free choice on a tilted pane of glass. We dove into the black hole information paradox, and we ended up talking about the scent of a lotus triggering the living algorithm of a lost love.
We've mapped out the sprawling architecture of Borisov's quantum orthodoxy. It is a worldview that forcefully challenges everything about how we perceive our mundane daily routines.
Just to pull everyone back to the surface for a quick summary of what we've survived today. We've explored the possibility of a universe where time might just be an illusion of static snapshots stored in an infinite library called Platonia.
A universe where every single second offers 37 dimensions of choice.
Where no information, no thought, no memory, no matter how deeply buried or burned, is ever deleted by the cosmos. And where your memory is the ultimate, indestructible proof of your reality.
The crucial so what for you, listening to this right now, is realizing where you actually stand. You are currently, at this exact second, standing at point zero. The virtual book of infinite possibilities is wide open in front of you.
You don't have to be a quantum physicist calculating wave functions or a theologian debating salvation to understand the massive weight of that realization. Every action you take, every word you choose to speak to your partner tonight, every decision you make is burning a new line into your personal, permanent book of reality.
But before we officially sign off, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought experiment that builds on everything we've discussed. Chernigovskaya mentioned that humanity's absolute greatest invention was external memory. Our ability to write things down, to paint on cave walls so we can speak with Plato or Pushkin across centuries.
Right, creating permanent physical records outside of our fragile brains.
Now, take Borisov's concept of a person's code, or algorithm, and apply it to our current hyper-connected digital age. Today, we leave behind terabytes of personal data. We leave thousands of text messages, infinite photos, hours of voice notes, video clips showing how we move and laugh.
Yeah, we document everything.
Question is, are we currently building our own digital fragrance of the lotus for future generations?
Oh, man. That is wild to think about. When you send a simple rambling voice memo to a friend today complaining about traffic, are you actually creating a high-fidelity time capsule?
Are you unknowingly providing the exact code, the micropauses, the specific intonation of your frustration, the laugh at the end that will allow someone 50 years from now to perfectly reconstruct your algorithm and have a living simulated dialogue with you?
It is the ultimate technological externalization of the book of reality. We are backing up our own source code in real time. We're making sure our time capsule survives the black hole. Well, thank you for taking this deep dive with us into the staggering architecture of time, memory, and the mechanics of the right choice.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Remember, the glass of your life is always going to be tilted by chaotic forces entirely outside your control. But the choice of which path to drop takes down the glass. That is, and always will be, entirely yours. Keep making your choices, trust your memory, and maybe, just maybe, try to get a little more comfortable in that tight new suit of the present moment.